two gunmen opened fire on Sydney's famous Bondi Beach, killing at least 11 people.
Hello and welcome to Unacademy. Yesterday, Australia has witnessed a horrific terror attack, an attack that has reverberated across the world and has serious implications for Australia, for the Jewish and the Muslim community across the world, and as well as for India and Indian community in Australia. In this short video, I will bring you exclusive details of how the attack unfolded, who were the perpetrators and their Pakistani connection, and what does it mean for India and the Indian diaspora in Australia. So first, let's talk about the events. At the famous Bondi Beach in Sydney, which is known as a paradise, which is known to be extremely popular amongst locals and as well as tourists, a horrific tragedy unfolded. As the Jewish community was marking the Hanukkah festival, two armed perpetrators carried out a mass shooting with a clear intent of causing terrorism and targeting the Jewish community. As a result, at least 15 people have been killed, including innocent children, and several people have been injured, and many of them are said to be in a critical condition, with the death count likely to increase in the coming hours and coming days. One of the terrorists has been shot dead by the authorities, and the other remains in police custody and undergoing treatment as he has been shot by the police. So, this incident highlights the threats as a result of terrorism and how it can destabilize even peaceful communities. See, the Hanukkah festival is a very sacred event for the Jewish community, one of the most important festivals on the Jewish calendar, where the Jews mark the recovery of Jerusalem. So, the Chabad community in Australia had organized this event. It goes on over a period of days, lasts almost more than a week. And the very start of the festival, this horrific terror attack has been carried out aimed at the Jewish community. The Australian Prime Minister immediately labeled this as a terror attack, and it has been labeled as an anti Semitic attack. So, first, let's understand this important concept, which can be relevant for our exams and current geopolitics. What do you mean by anti Semitism?
The emergence of Nazism and its leader, Adolf Hitler, changed Europe and led to the greatest destruction that the Jewish people have ever faced, the Holocaust.
Anti Semitism is a feeling of racial hatred, racial discrimination, and even going to the extent of committing violence against the Semitic community, that is, the Jewish community. So, any act of prejudice or bias, any act of hostility, even discrimination going all the way till violence shown against the Jews on the account of their religion, their ethnicity, their race, accounts to be labeled as Semitism, anti Semitism. In the past, the Jewish community has suffered many horrors since ancient times till date. How the Jews were exiled from Jerusalem and the sacred land by the Romans. And as they took refuge in Europe and other parts of the world, throughout ancient and medieval history, the Jews were targeted and persecuted. They were always seen as outsiders, and on religious grounds or racial ethnic grounds, or even on economic and political grounds, they would constantly be harassed. There would be bias against them, there would be discrimination against them, there would be outright violence as well. So the term Semitism, anti-Semitism, was first coined in 1879 by Wilhelm Marr in Germany, following the rabid hatred against the Jews that was very evident in medieval Europe and in modern day Europe. So, anti Semitism can take on different forms. As I was mentioning, it can be driven by religious fundamentalism and radicalism, and also driven by a lot of misinformation, fake news, and hate towards one community. In the religious form, we have seen in the past where the Jews, who were seen as outsiders in Europe, they were blamed for the death of the Jesus without any basis. And this led to targeted attacks against the Jews. Even on economic grounds, because Jews are considered to be generally hardworking, smarter, they get into good positions from being lawyers to bankers to financiers. Even today, if you look at most of the top banks and investment firms, Many Jewish people would be heading it at top positions. So then, when there was an economic crisis in Europe in the 19th century, there was this propaganda that spread against the Jews that the Jews were controlling the economy. They were enriching themselves to the disadvantage of the native Europeans. And this sentiment led to the targeting of the Jews largely on economic grounds. Then we all know about the World War era in Nazi Germany, how Adolf Hitler rose to power primarily by labeling the Jews as the problem for Germany. He would go on to even label the Jews as termites who had to be exterminated, treating them as pests. So, under Nazi Germany, on racial grounds, where Nazi party under Hitler would believe in the so-called superiority of the Aryan race, and this would lead to targeted violence against the Jews, leading to the Holocaust, where up to 6 million Jews were exterminated, including in gas chambers. Then, in modern times, we have seen the targeting of Jews on political grounds and geopolitical lines. This is largely connected to the Israel Palestine issue, where pro Palestinian extremists, jihadist outfits, are known to have targeted Jews across the world. So, all these incidents, they get labeled as anti Semitism. In fact, many countries have strict laws against this, and they explicitly prohibit any sort of anti Semitic activity. But one might argue many other communities also face such racial, ethnic, or religion based discrimination, hatred, and even violence. Yes, absolutely, that's true. But as I said, historically, the Jews have been at the receiving end of such discrimination and violence. And hence, many countries are very serious about preventing anti Semitism. Now, who were responsible for this terrorist attack? Who were the perpetrators? According to the reports, it's a father son duo of Pakistani origin. Sajid Akram, a 50-year-old man of Pakistani origin who had entered Australia many years ago, was now a fruit seller and had acquired the required visa permits to reside in Australia and work in Australia. And his son, Naveed Akram. These two terrorists, driven by radical religious fundamentalist ideology, have carried out this brutal atrocity. And according to reports, in the car that they were driving, explosives were found, including IED bombs, and they have even recovered ISIS related flags. So, marking a connection with the Islamic State and the ideology of the Islamic State. And what is even more disturbing is the Pakistani angle, the Pakistani connection, which we will discuss a little more in a short while. This father son duo carried out this dastardly attack. And as I said, Sajid Akram has been killed, whereas Naveed Akram remains in hospital undergoing treatment and will face terror charges. This brings up questions about Australia's gun laws as well, as to how Sajid Akram could easily acquire so many assault rifles and advanced weapons which could be used in this terrorist attack. Now, this brings up the question of what does this mean for the Jewish community, for Muslims, for immigrants? What does it mean for the Israel Palestine issue? Who should be blamed for this? And what do you think about the Pakistani link? What does it mean for India? These are some things we will explore in the next few minutes. First, let's talk about the implications for India and the Indian migrants in Australia. This incident is most definitely going to fuel far right wing extremist views and ideologies in Australia. Don't forget, Australia is home to a very large immigrant population from across the world, and especially from South Asia. So, given the South Asian links of these two terrorists, that too with Pakistan, there is a very good chance that Indians could also face the brunt of the rise in racism. In fact, Australia has already witnessed such sentiments. In the last few months itself, there have been far right wing rallies aimed at immigrants, not just illegal migrants, even at legal migrants, with specific focus on Indian migrants. The Indians constitute roughly 1 million of Australia's population, close to approximately. There are up to 9.5 lakh Indians residing in Australia, studying, working, contributing to the Australian society and economy. Indians in general are regarded as a peace loving community, law abiding community. But given that Indians take up key positions, they They are able to rise up the social ladder with better incomes, better housing. It creates a socio-demographic problem at the grassroots level where the natives tend to blame all the problems in the society, in the economy, on the immigrants. That is where Indian diaspora could be at the receiving end of what is happening in Australia. So this terrorist attack will only add more fuel to far right-wing extremism. And that is where the concern lies for India. Now, before you blame this attack as just a religion inspired attack or you blame an entire community, please think about the larger implications and dimensions involved here. I would like to remind you of one incident, the Christchurch mosque shootings of 2019 that occurred in New Zealand. In 2019, an Australian man who was radicalized by far right wing extremist ideology on the grounds of anti immigration and xenophobia, he went on to open fire at a mosque, killing many innocent Muslims as well. So, this is where I would like to insist that extremism can be found across faiths. And the problem here at hand is much more complex than you can imagine or estimate. But of course, one common thread which we can't miss is the Pakistani link. Look at any major attack in the world, there is a Pakistani connection directly or indirectly. Be it the 9/11 attacks or the 2005 London bombings and the spate of attacks seen across Europe, from the Charlie Hebdo incident to attacks across France, Germany, and other parts of Europe. Many attacks have been linked with Pakistani terror modules. And this again highlights what India has been shouting to the world since 1980s, that Pakistan is the epicenter of terrorism. Pakistan had actively cultivated radicalism and extremism as a part of its misguided policy aimed at India. Pakistan believed that by radicalizing the community, by using religion and propaganda, it could wage a covert proxy war against India to bleed India through a thousand cuts. But this disastrous policy of Pakistan today has turned the country into an epicenter of terror with global linkages. Be it Al Qaeda, be it Islamic State, Lashkar-e-Toiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, or the Hizbul Mujahideen. India has been shouting to the world about the threats from Pakistan, not just to India, but the entire world. Most of the Western world has turned blind to India's appeals, be it in 1980s and 1990s, or be it post 2000. India has presented evidence after evidence linking terror attacks with Pakistani state actors and non-state actors. But the global action has been limited, and many times, unfortunately and ironically, the Western powers have even they have been in cahoots with what Pakistan has been doing in the AFPAC region. So this is a wake-up call to the world. Now, Australia and the other countries concerned should bring enough pressure on Pakistan to crack down on radicalism. And this could be probably an opportunity for India to further expose Pakistani links with terrorist networks and radical elements. Now, what does it mean for Jews and Muslims? See, there are two ways of looking at it. And I know I'm entering into very controversial territory, but trust me, I'll provide you a very neutral argument. And we will look at both sides of the argument. See, right now, around the world, there is a lot of hate, not particularly against Jews, but especially against Israel. Now, when you think of Israel and the entire divide that exists over the Israel Arab question, it goes back to the very creation of Israel, goes back to the Israel Palestine problem. The creation of Israel was largely a Western imperial agenda backed by Britain and United States, where Palestinian land and territory was annexed, enabling the illegal creation of Israel, which went on to annex Palestinian territory and remains under the illegal occupation of Palestinian territory. Israel disregarded the UN two-state plan and never allowed Palestine to be formed as a state. So the Palestinian resistance has taken the form of extremism and resulted in acts of terrorism, as we saw on October 7th, 2023, by Hamas, which carried out a brutal terror attack aimed at the Jews. So in Israel, within the Jewish community, there are two strands which you find in any religion. There is one set of ultra conservative nationalists, radicals, to which Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu belongs to, who believe that there is no right for Palestinians to exist or there's no right for Palestine to be formed as a state. There are another set of Jews who believe in coexistence, who believe that both Israel Palestine can work together. See, the historical blunders, errors that were committed as a result of colonial imperialism and the expansionist ideas of the West. That apart, the only way forward, as India believes, is the two-state solution to allow for Palestine to be created, resolve the issue so that the enmity can be brought to an end and two communities can live side by side. But today, the Gaza war, which was Israel's response against the October 7th attack, and the brutal use of force by Netanyahu's regime has led to a lot of anger and hatred against the Jews in general and against Israel in particular. There are pro Palestinian rallies, protests across the world as Israel has slaughtered more than 65,000 people in Gaza. And Israel is accused of committing a genocide. And not all the Jews or all Israelis support this policy. So you need to understand that this attack, yes, it is targeted at the Jewish community. It is an anti Semitic attack. There is no doubt about it. There is a clear angle of religion involved. But to blame pro Palestinian protests for calling for the end of the Gaza war, for calling for creation of Palestinian state, that would be too extreme. And that is most likely what Israel would try to do. Under Netanyahu, Israel would try to twist and exploit this incident to their advantage to try and bring a crackdown on pro-Palestinian protests to end the Gaza war. Now, if you look at the other side of the argument, this could result in rising hate against Muslims in general. So, given the religious inclination here, clearly the attack was motivated by religious ideology, no doubt about it. It was Islamist terrorist, radicalized by the jihadist ideology of ISIS, who took aim at the Jews who were innocent, that too in a faraway land. And what is ironic is that Australia has stood with Palestinians. It has recently recognized the Palestinian state and brought pressure on Israel to end the brutal Gaza war. So, this is where radicalism makes these extremists blind to the reality on the ground. On both sides, you do find a strand of extremism, a strand which basically perpetrates more violence. But at the same time, don't forget, there are civilized humans on both the sides. And that is true for any faith, for any religion. If you don't believe me, I'll give you an example from yesterday's terror attack itself. For every Naveed Akram, for every Sajid Akram, there is a Ahmed Al Ahmed. And who is Ahmed Al Ahmed? He was the hero at Bondi Beach. This man, I'm sure you must have seen the viral videos.
Oh! It's a man. Oh no!
He risked his life to take on the terrorist and disarmed him while he got shot. So today he is undergoing recovery and he single-handedly saved many lives. And the Australian government and the people are calling Ahmed Al Ahmed a hero for helping mitigate the impact of this attack. So instead of blindly blaming one group of people, one community, we need to look at the more complex and deep-rooted issues that defines today's geopolitics and the world of terrorism. So this is indeed a complex topic with very divisive views and opinions. And I'm sure you may not agree with what I have discussed. But as I said, this is a very complex issue that requires a nuanced understanding as it goes all the way back to the Israel-Palestine issue and the history of Jews being targeted over centuries. So to explore more about such complex topics in international relations, I'm starting a platinum batch for international relations for UPSC aspirants. The classes are starting today from 15th December, and tomorrow and day after, I will be covering India Pakistan and with special focus on Pakistan being the epicenter of global terrorism. So those interested, please join my classes. And in Platinum, you have a two-way interaction with the teacher where your cameras are on and I can see the students and we can have a seamless interaction, solving your doubts, addressing your queries, and I can also ensure I will hold the students accountable in the class. So those interested to dive further into the world of geopolitics and international relations, and those who want to develop a nuanced perspective on these complex and controversial issues, do join the class. And the link for the same is provided in the video description below. On this note, I bring the class to an end. Let me know what is your view on this. What is your take? And please mention that in the comments. I want a very engaging debate in the comment section. I'll look at the comments and I'll try to reply back. That is it. Thanks for watching.